like to say good evening, good evening, good evening. Uh, for those who are just tuning in, this is Dr. Kathy Simmons. I am starting a new podcast uh, beginning tonight. We had did 40 days of prayer beginning January the 1st, and then immediately after that, we did 40 days of fasting. And we gave it a little break as we had some other assignments to do, and now June 1st, 2025, I'm going to start this new podcast talking about a faith walk, walking by faith, right? So we're going to deal with hopefully 40 days of a faith walk with God. And I would like to start with a scripture today as we are dealing with steps of faith, walking with purpose. I want to do the book of Hebrews, the 11th chapter. I want to deal a little bit with that. I'm just going to only read one verse tonight because I'm not going to be before you long, but I did want to come and talk about a few things tonight. So we're going to be probably in the book of Hebrews for a little bit. So chapter 11 is our faith book that talks about a whole lot of people, biblical folks, who had faith in God and went on their journeys, because there's a lot of journeys that we go on in life. And it's whether or not, do we have the faith to believe? Do we have the faith to progress on? Do we have the faith to trust God for all that we do? And so that's what faith is when we deal with Hebrews, the 11th chapter, verse number 1. I'm only going to read verse number 1. And it says, "Now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen." And I'm reading from the King James Version. "Now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen." And as we think about that faith walk, again, we are believing in things, we are hoping for things, right? But we don't see any physical evidence. We don't know the evidence. We don't know what's going to really become of it. So we are hoping, we are striving, we are believing that God is going to give us what we're asking for, or what we believe in God for, but we don't see it necessarily with our physical eyes at that moment. We are believing Him spiritually that what God's words say, we're going to hold tight to it, right? So faith is the substance of things hopeful, the evidence of things not seen. We don't have the evidence sometimes when we are believing, when we are praying, when we are hoping that God answers the prayers that we are trusting Him for. And so there are many things in our life that we often pray about, and we are trying to believe and hold tight to whether or not, will God do it for us? Will God allow us to see the benefits? Will God actually do what we're believing Him to do? And sometimes we get the answers right away, and sometimes it might be a later time. So there are seasons in our life. And so as I began to think about this faith walk and this faith journey, I often think about my mother. And so we celebrated her today, and we celebrated her in this past Tuesday, because that was the birthday that we celebrate, May 27th, for her and my sister. And she turned 93 years old. My mother turned 93 years old. And she had been on a faith walk for many, many years, probably since she was in her latter years of her teenage years. She believed God and she trusted God for the victory. And so my mother had 14 children, her and my dad. They were married for 46 years before he passed in 1994. And so I've seen her with that faith walk all of my life, how she journeyed on in spite of what was before her. She just trusted God. She believed God for what was going to be before her. And so she trusted Him for her children. She trusted God in everything that came her way. And there were some challenges, there were some hard times, there were things that come up in life. And still yet we have to trust God and believe Him for the victory. And so my mother always taught her children that. And so I had one brother who deceased back in 2005. but there are 13 still living siblings. And the baby sister, my baby sister's over 50 years old. My oldest sister's over 70 plus years, 76 years to be exact. Um, and so when we think about everything that she dealt with, everything um, that she trusted God for, she trusted God, again, like I said, for her children. She trusted God for things that came up, interruptions in our lives, right? Roadblocks come up sometimes. And she always trusted God. I didn't know how she was able to do all the things that she did, right? With the income that was coming in. And she didn't really work a full-time position, straight full-time for a long period of time until my baby sister was in the first grade. And so you think about all the kids she had, and she would teach us that faith. She would teach us that faith walk, walking on faith, believing God in faith. So every time we would call her about our challenges or things we were struggling with, and she said, you have to believe God, you have to trust God, you have to pray about some things. And so she taught us that. And so as we celebrated her today in her 93 years of life, um, all 12 of my siblings was able to be there. Like I said, the only one that was not there was my deceased brother. Um, and so I think that's a blessing from the Lord in the faith walk that she had all these years in life. And so we trusted her and we believed her. Um, and we've tried God for ourselves, and we found out that God is a champion. We found out that God is true to his word. We found out that if we trust God, right, if we put our trust in God and we believe in God, we've seen some victories. We've seen some benefits come our way of trusting God. It's not always an easy walk because sometimes we want things right away. Sometimes we believe in God and we want it to happen instantly. And sometimes it does. And sometimes it doesn't. Because there are seasons in our life, right, that we do this faith walk. There are seasons, but God told us to delight ourselves in him, and he will give us the desires of our hearts. And so it goes back to us making sure that we're in tune to God, making sure that we're connecting with God, making sure that we're putting God first in our lives. And so there are some things I had prayed about for quite some time. I have this one son, and I trusted God. Before I even had this son, God had promised me a son. And sure enough, God delivered, and I had that son. And in teaching him about faith and sharing with him about faith, he held on to faith and finished up his college education last year. And then this year, just this past weekend, this past Friday, he got married. So I'd been praying for a little bit since he probably went off to college about God allowing him to find the right purpose, the right person in his life. And God answered, but God doesn't always show us, what's going to happen like right away or when it's going to happen. We have to trust him that God knows the perfect timing, right? That God knows the perfect timing for our lives. And so the best thing we could do is just to trust God and believe in him, right? And when we believe and we trust God and we say, God, show us the way. God, I'm praying about some things. God, I'm believing you for the victory. We have to be willing to wait on God. And that's the hard part, is that waiting period that we have. But we have to learn to trust him. And so I've learned to trust him. There's times I've failed. There's times that I've fallen short. There's times that things don't always go my way. But I'm so grateful. I'm so thankful for everything that God has done in my life and everything he is doing and everything that I know he is going to do for the future. And so again, I'm holding fast to Hebrews, the 11th chapter, verse 1. Now faith is the substance of things hoped for, but the evidence of things what not seen. Sometimes we don't see those things that we are hoping and believing God for, but the evidence comes later on if we continue to keep trusting God. God says in Matthew, in the book of Matthew 6:33, seek ye first the kingdom of God. So we got to seek God's face. We got to seek God first, right? And he says, and his righteousness, and all other things will be added unto us. So we have to, again, seek God, right? We have to make sure we are spending quality time with God. We have to make sure that we're in tune to God and talking with God and sharing with God and letting Him know everything, right, that we're going through. That's a faith journey as we are believing, as we are seeking Him for His word, and as we are seeking God for His purpose in our life. And we're asking God to show us the way. And when we begin to do that, and when we begin to spend the time with God, right, and we spend the time connecting with Him, God begins to do some things in our lives that will blow us away, blow our minds, right? Because we say, oh my goodness, I was trusting God for a simple thing, and God has developed this thing into something huge, something big. And so, do we trust God enough with our life? Do we trust God for the victory? Do we trust God that He knows when to plant a seed at that appointed time? And so it goes back to, now faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. And so I was praying for my son, right? When he went off to college in 2019, and now we're in 2025. And so when he told me that he was going to get married, I said, "Oh, really? You sure about that now?" And I began talking to him and sharing some things. And by the next day, as I'm in my feelings, God had to come back to me and say, "Isn't this what you were praying for? Were you not praying for some things to happen?" And so it doesn't come when we think it should come, but it comes. And will we and gulp around it? Would we trust God? And so I trusted God. I had to get out of my feelings, and I said, "You're right, God. I had been praying about some things, and now you are showing me the evidence of what I had been praying for." And I had been praying for marriages even within my immediate family, and God is starting to do some things. So we had two marriages this past weekend. One was with my son and my new daughter-in-law, and then the second one was on Saturday with my niece and my new nephew-in-law. And so God is just doing the thing. When we pray about it, right? And when we trust God for the victory, we got to let God be God. When we surrender everything and say, "God be God," He'll blow us away. And so all we have to do is sit back, right? Make sure we're reading our word. Make sure we're in tune to God, and trust God for the outcome. Trust Him for the victory. Trust Him for the overlay, and God will give us the victory. That's the kind of God we serve. We serve a big God, a huge God, a God who knows everything, a God who has all power in His hands. He told Abraham, if you go back to the book of Abraham, right? If you go back to the book of Genesis, I'm sorry, if you go back to the book of Genesis, with chapter 12, he begins to have this faith walk with Abraham. He called Abraham a righteous man. And as God began to talk to Abraham, He said, "Come out of your land, and I'm going to bless you, Abraham." Right? He had to have faith. This was a faith walk that Abraham had. He didn't know how God was going to bless him. He didn't know other than what God told him. He didn't see any evidence at the time. God just said, "Pack up all your stuff, Abraham, and I want you to come and journey where I'm going to take you." And He told Abraham, "If you would journey where I'm going to take you, Abraham, I'm going to bless you so much so that your seed is going to be abundantly," right? "And your seed is going to be so great and so much that it's going to be like the stars in the air that you can't count it. And it's going to be like the grain of sand that you can't count it, Abraham. But if you walk this faith walk with me, Abraham, I'm going to open up doors for you, and I'm going to take you into a land of milk and honey." And God did that thing. God did that thing. And so we just got to trust God. We got to believe God, even when we don't see it right away. We got to keep on trusting Him, and God will open up some doors and pour us out blessings that we will be able to receive if we would just yield to God's unchanging hand, if we would just do what God tells us to do. And so again, we celebrate my mother 93rd birthday. She is still living. She is still strong. She is still feisty. God is still allowing her to do some things. So she is still in her right mind. She is still feeding herself. She is still clothing herself. She is still doing some things. And I know there are many people out there who are that age or older, and God is just blessing them. Why? Because they have a faith walk, and they believe and they trust God for the victory. God also told Abraham when Sarah was wondering why she had not conceived, and God began to tell Abraham, "Abraham, I'm going to bless you with your seed," right? And God did. It was 25 years later. So are we willing to go the distance? Are we willing to wait until God allows the blessings to be poured into us. And so God told Abraham at the age of 100, and his wife was 90 years old, and he began to tell Abraham that your wife is going to conceive. Even at the age of 90 years old, the promised seed is going to come. And Isaac, sure enough, came when she was 90. God says, is anything too hard for him? Is anything too hard for him? Sometimes we don't trust God enough. Sometimes we say, well, it's too much. God is not going to bless me with that. No, we got to be willing to say, God, I know you're going to do this thing. I don't know when you're going to do it, but I'm going to believe you for the victory. And we got to trust God until the end. We got to trust God until he opens up that door. We got to trust God until he pours us out that blessing. We got to trust God until he shows us the result. We got to trust him, and God will reveal himself strong. And so again, I'm going to leave that with you tonight as I'm about to tune out. But I'm going to try to do this for 40 more days, right, to the night, and then 39 more days after this. So again, I'm going to leave with you the book of Hebrews, chapter 11, verse number 1. Now, faith is the substance of things, what? Hoped for, and the evidence of things not seen. Y'all have a wonderful rest of your evening. We'll try to be in tune tomorrow a little bit earlier, hopefully by 7 o'clock p.m. I'll try to do my podcast again at 7 p.m. for those who are able to tune in. Or again, these videos stay on a line for a little while, so you're able to tune in whenever is convenient for you. So I'm tuning off right now. This is Reverend Dr. Kathy Simmons. Again, this is a faith walk that we're going to be on for the next 40 days, for the next 39 days. The day is the first day, and so we'll stay on until the month of July when we get to 40 days. Tuning off. Y'all have a wonderful rest of your evening. Good night.